Get started. First, I want to welcome everybody to 2022 National Training Conference. Unfortunately, we are virtual again this year. Hopefully next year we'll be face-to-face and have a little bit more fun. As you come in, if you could put your name and where you're from and what you do in the chat, that would help everybody see who all's here and what resources are here. And with that, I'll start off with introductions, and I think all of you know both of us, but Dr. Janice Holt is the Federal Project Officer that deals with most Washington and most of the Oregon grantees. And myself, I deal with Idaho, Alaska, one grantee in Seattle and one in Eastern Washington, one in Portland, and South and East Oregon. And I'm sure all of you know who your project officer is. If not, feel free to ask. With that, Janice, would you like to start off with your wake up?
Oh, yeah, let's do the wake up first. So that means I'm going to navigate my screen so we all know how that can go sometimes. So hold on. This is just to make sure you're all paying attention. All right, now does anybody want to claim that video? Come off mute and feel free to claim that video.
That is my crew out in Cottage Grove, Oregon.
Yo, Eugene, near Eugene, also known as Looking Glass. So thank you so much for sharing that. It gave me a great chuckle.
It was nice to hear an old-fashioned song too.
Yeah, and I was grooving to it. I don't think Tom was, though.
I'm really proud of that crew. They spend a lot of time on their TikToks and just getting the word out there in our rural county there.
Thanks, Prince. And then moving to something a little more serious, we also want to make sure we do our travel land acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded the land since time immemorial and who still inhabit the area today. I'm north of Seattle, so I'm on the land of the Coast Salish people. And if anybody's interested in looking and identifying what tribal land you're on, you can go to the Native Land Digital app. And that has been developed by a Canadian not-for-profit group, which is a great resource. And I have it on my phone at all times. All right, thank you, Tom.
Okay. So moving on, next slide, please. So today's presentation is about aftercare versus follow-up. It's something that nationally has been asked a lot, not only differentiating between them, but documentation and requirements. So this is what central office thought would be the best platform to get this information out to you, so we can get, I guess, a one training at a time so that everybody hears the same thing. So aftercare, as you see here, it's only required for residential stay-in programs, which residential, very simply put, means if the kid's head hits the bed, it's a residential stay. If they never go into a bed, their prevention or other work, then it's not residential. So for BCP, TLP, and MGH, this is a required part of the grant. Follow-up is for all the grants, and follow-up will be explained down below, and all 4 grants required to do follow-up with the youth. Next slide, please. Next slide. Ah, there we go. Did we jump one or two? I think we're good. Yeah, there you go. Next slide. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so statutory, regulatory, and NOFO language. The information on the NOFO comes from statutory regulatory language, and every year there's slight changes to the NOFO, but some of the language is boilerplate legally required, and so that doesn't change. But per the RHY rule, aftercare is listed as an additional service provided beyond the period of residential stay that offers continuity and supportive follow-up to youth served by the program. That little term in there has confused many people when it says supportive follow-up. It is not a follow-up process. Supportive follow-up is ongoing services, case management, things like that. The follow-up, taking this out of the street outreach notice, it's the act of assessing youth progress after the youth has received safety and resource referral, which normally a lot of programs, when a youth leaves shelter within 24 hours, they'll contact the youth to make sure they made it to their destination or they're not fighting with the parents or how their situation is. If you send someone, by bus to their mother's house a state away, the first thing you're gonna do is call and make sure they got there. So those are follow-up calls. Aftercare is a service-related call. Follow-up is just checking. Okay, next slide, please. So the comprehensive youth-centered service model, the aftercare period is up to 90 days after they leave service. And that 90 days, I believe a further slide states that it has to be regular contact over that 90-day period. And our standard, at least my standard, I think Janice does the same thing, is 30, 60, 90. One follow-up at least every 30 days on the youth to make sure they're doing well. Or I'm sorry, one aftercare contact on the youth to make sure they're doing well. Those going beyond state lines, there's no change in the requirement. You still have to do it. You may have to do more work with a referral organization across state lines because you may not have that relationship. So you'll have to follow up with the youth and the organization and make sure it's working well for the youth. Next slide. So your documentation and your strategy, aftercare plans must be developed with the youth, outline what services were provided and include referrals, healthcare, counseling, insurance, school employment. The big thing about developed, says aftercare plans must be developed with the youth. BCP, that's a requirement within 72 hours of entry. TLP-MGH does not have that requirement within time. I mean, they have to do it, but it doesn't have to be within 72 hours. And SOP, of course, does not have to do aftercare. Tracking, follow-up aftercare. They have to track the progress, housing, basically the exit plan and strategy you set up is what it's supposed to track and look at and make sure it's working. And yeah, here it's, regular intervals for 90 days. The documentation says at a minimum the data contact status of client. The other thing that is recommended to be put in there is method of contact. If someone leaves shelter and you're contacting them through Instagram and you move on to a different position and somebody else steps in, if they don't know method, they might be trying to call when that person may not have an active number. So method of contact is good to have. Next slide. Oh, go ahead, Janice.
Great, thanks, Tom. So we had a question in the chat, and it was, is there a maximum period for aftercare? And the response to that would be no. There's the minimum requirement, which is what FISB RHY outlines, and the NOFO is outlined in the legislation and CFRs. But the agency can make a determination as to the length beyond that. Of course, I'm sure it would have to do with staffing and availability, but it's only the minimum that we address. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, there are many agencies I've been to that have done it for many, many months for some youth because they needed it. So before we get into some discussion, we have some poll questions we'd like to run past you and see just how you folks are doing this and what's your best methods. So I believe, Katie, I think you put those up. And while we're doing the polls, yeah, Kathy, the BCP rules and the NOFO both require an aftercare plan, or often it's called the exit plan, must be completed within 72 hours of entry into the program.
The language is within 3 days.
Well, yeah. Same thing, 3 days.
No, I know. I'm visual. I'm a visual person, so I see a 3, not a 7 too. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
And then there was a question with regards to having access to the slides, and I responded in the chat, but that'll all be managed and posted and held by RHY. Oh, and they're in the attendee hub. That's the faster way.
Okay.
All right. Can we stop sharing the poll?
Oh, there we go.
Did we want to have any conversation about the first poll?
I think it would be good to open up on all of these poll questions as to what's working and why for people, and maybe some programs are struggling with contacting youth for aftercare. Any input or help from other programs would be valuable, I'm sure. Okay, Rebecca's got food boxes. It appears food is a driving factor for youth participation.
If you guys want to share your examples of what you're identifying as best practices in the chat, or if you want to come off of mute and share with the group, that would be great.
I'll jump in, Janice, and share an idea, something that at the Coffee Oasis in Tacoma that we have been working hard on implementing is first with our BCP program, anybody that's on our wait list to get in, like right now we have all 12 beds full. We make sure that those that will be doing aftercare within our outreach program is already working with the youth as they're on the wait list. So we're trying to be much more intentional about that. So every time someone calls or shows up, they're automatically connected with somebody on the outreach team. And then again, when anyone's exited or leaves, well, we have by our exit door a place with the outreach cards and a picture of them and who they are, as well as they're in the shelter every week, making sure that somebody leaves even in the middle of the night, they know who to call and who's going to be following up with them. And then on the actual exit paperwork, they're assigned to the outreach person so they know who's accountable, because just making sure no one falls through the cracks and actually making an assignment of the aftercare. And then lastly, what we find really helpful in building rapport and relationships with our youth for aftercare is taking away the obstacle or barrier of transportation. So we go to the youth and we find we have more authentic relationships when we're able to enter into their space, respecting their boundaries and bringing resources to them as a way of facilitating the relationship and getting to some more basic needs and meaningful conversation.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that a lot. And I'm wondering if Prince or I think, was it Eliza who shared about, oh no, maybe it was Kendra, talking about the extended, keeping the youth engaged for extended periods of time after with these incentives that you put out there.
Yeah, we train our case managers to not only case manage, but to build relationships with these youth, to try to build it more than just business, and to try to find out what trauma they have been exposed to or what barriers they have been exposed to during their life. And then during their program period, that's what we're trying to help them overcome. It seems that more than food or money or resources, the biggest draw to our youth engaging in aftercare is the relationship with the case manager. They tend to not to want to disappoint them because they understand that they've been in this hard work and fight together during this time period. That seems to me to be the biggest draw, is that investment into the relationship, is what brings them back.
Okay.
Thank you, Prince.
Portia, if you don't mind, could you kind of go into the client-led engagement that you listed up there?
Yeah. I think so this is from Exiting a Transitional Living Program. And we operate several different transitional living programs in King County, Washington, but sometimes clients exit at, different points, like what barriers they may be facing upon exit really vary from client to client. And so we try to let the aftercare kind of be guided by their current situation. Some clients are kind of done with case management at the end of their transitional living program, right? They really crave that independence, and encouraging that, because that's a great next step. We want them to be independent. We want them to really take responsibility for what comes next. And so kind of just making aftercare brief and ensuring that they continue to do well in those first 3 months is really critical. And not making it feel like a burden that they have to continue to engage in services. And then for folks that might be feeling less stable or feeling like there's more barriers to maintaining their stability upon exit, allowing them to engage more heavily or kind of identify, okay, what things do you need in these next 3 months to ensure that we have long-term stability? So kind of letting it feel more like a choice, because during program, right, it feels more like an obligation. And aftercare, we get to move to that next step of feeling more like, what do you need and what does this look like for you? And really having there be a lot of client agency in what aftercare looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, we have a hand raised by Eliza.
Eliza, go ahead, Eliza.
Yeah, I was just going to expand on what I wrote in the chat, but just that I think aftercare has been a really good opportunity for staff to reach out and offer to, remind youth that we worked with that, hey, the holidays are coming up. If you don't have anywhere to go, we also are still doing life skills every Wednesday. If you guys want to come by, we're doing activities, trying to keep them engaged, not just because we have to, but it can be very isolating for them if they're going into an apartment by themselves. They're used to be in a group setting, and trying to have like an open door policy for them. And then that kind of opens it up to offering like food or clothing or, navigation supports that we have in other programs.
Okay, thank you.
We have time for one more, or should we move on, Tom?
We have time for one more. Somebody like to share? Yeah.
Well, Kevin, I was wondering if you wanted to share, Kevin from Jackson Street Youth Services, if you wanted to share what you put in the chat.
Sure, if I figured out how to unmute. So, okay, there you go. Yeah, I was just talking more so because in the TLP world, we got a lot of time with these young adults, up to 18 months in the traditional Tier 1 program. So we get to know a lot of their really, really long-term goals. We have the one I'm speaking towards is someone that's been in foster care and wants to enter that and fix a lot of the things that they saw were problematic in the system. And so a lot of the aftercare, now that they're getting more stable and a lot of the independent skills are there, they are looking at the more long-term end game stuff. Like, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? How do I get to the next step other than just surviving? I want to thrive, essentially. So aftercare to us, in a lot of ways, is not only sustaining what they have, but growing what they want and getting to the next place. So, and that's helped a lot in keeping them engaged and keeping them wanting to stay in services to get more support.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. And Kathy has a question here about how you document this. When you're putting the aftercare information in, it should be listed as aftercare. You know, a lot of people, there's different forms of documentation that people use. I know a lot of them have just a separate, as part of the exodus, it just has attached to it 30, 60, 90-day contact points that shows method of contact, who they talk to, what's going on, just a small case note section to go with it. And if you can't reach them, they still, you know, you can document the attempt, because you have to at least make that attempt. So, okay. Any other questions for here?
So Tom, the only thing I would add to that is most of the grants have that structured aftercare plan in place. And usually that's where, when Tom was talking earlier about when you're very scriptive about, is it phone calls, is it texting, is it, you know, face-to-face, what is your plan for that contact? And usually they'll wrap it into one form and can track it on one form. And so that's easy, but it is at the agency's discretion as to how they're tracking it. The important thing is that when we open a file, we need to be able to read it and see the story and the service delivery and how it rolls, you know, after the exit for aftercare.
Okay, we got a couple polls left. Let's go ahead and do those. We should be running that Jeopardy music during the polls.
There you go, 50-50 split.
Is there someone that does use a youth board to connect with youth after exit that would be willing to speak to what that looks like?
So I can share. I'm Dion's. I work at Alba Collaborative. We use Youth Advisory Board for any and all youth eligible for our services that have either come through our program, currently working with our program, or that have since stopped using our services, to give us their thoughts and opinions on what went well for them, what they feel like we need that we don't, like a current resource that we don't offer, and things that they think we can change about our program. Before I got out here, that's how our educational support specialist role came up, was that they were requesting more folks for that. So she now works with 14 to 17 from our program, and does provide them with tutoring, helps them with GED services, and has just recently helped a kiddo start college that came through our program after working with them for a couple years.
If I understand correctly, you're using the Youth Advisory Board to kind of evaluate and review and improve your services, but you're not necessarily using them to connect with the youth directly.
We're doing both.
Okay.
So we have 3 different ways we use Youth Advisory Board. So like there's one session where we just do connection. So like we just go out and do a fun activity. Like tonight they're going golfing. They're going to do mini golf. So that's just straight rapport building with staff, just to check in, see how they're doing and get a gauge for them. Then we have one session every 4 months where they come and they tell us like these are the policies that need to change. And then we have one session where they come and then we bring them resources after we like talk to them about like, what do you feel like you need? What resources are you trying to tap into that you don't know are out there? And then we gather like community partners to come in and talk to them and share our services. And then we also like try and plug them into different parts of our organization, even as they're like aging out of the ALBA system, so that way they don't get lost in the shuffle and fall through the cracks in the ground. So it's a combination of all of that.
Okay, it's like the last poll here.
Good. I'm just wondering, before we move on though, Prince had a question that he asked in the chat. How do we use our YAC and still maintain confidentiality?
Okay.
I don't know if anybody had any thoughts about that.
Well, I was going to ask confidentiality in what realm?
Here in Oregon, we're not allowed to. Our privacy laws are pretty tight, and so we don't share personal identifiable information with anybody outside of the agency. And so to do that, we would have to let our Youth Action Council know that this is a youth that was in the program and this is aftercare. You know what I mean? And so when I talk about confidentiality, it's like, how do I get around that portion of it?
Well, I know one thing I've recommended for, like BCPs having youth input directly to the board and stuff is to have a staff member collect all the information and present it. That way there's no way to identify youth.
But then they still need to work with the youth. That's, you know what I mean? So how do I introduce them, I should say?
Well, that's one I don't have an answer for. Maybe somebody here has figured it out.
I guess my question would be, how old are they? And in what context are you utilizing the information?
Our housing programs could be anywhere from 16 to 24. And so during that process for aftercare, we're trying to maintain their stability. So we're asking questions about budget. We're asking personal questions about how they're doing and what are the barriers in their life at this moment that we can help them to overcome. All of the aftercare that we do is pretty personal in nature. So if I were to, let me first say that, again, I am a fan of using our Youth Action Council as much as possible. I just want to know how I can do that and still maintain the privacy.
One of the things our program has done is by invitation, because if you invite aftercare and you notify them that these will be, your YAC or your YAB is going to be leading this, then they're giving consent by attending.
My next thing is, even after that, is that now, because I would love to make the Youth Action Council a formal part of our aftercare. But my next question is, after they make that introduction, then what is it that the Youth Action Council is able to do, other than just be peer support?
I think that they can do a lot in terms of, yes, peer support, but also say, I've been there, here's what I did. And sometimes they'll say, hey, this is how I did this application, or, this is how I went to college, or whatever their goals may be. I think that they start to see each other's interests, and they're able to kind of feed off each other in that way.
In our facility, we actually had them help administer a youth safety and satisfaction survey. So it was kind of like peer-to-peer. And then we also have had them attend celebrations in the community together. Like they've often go to Pride Fest together. They will make invitations when there's a current issue in our community that is being addressed publicly. They will work with residents to see if they want to be a part of that and how they want to be a part of that. So it's kind of linked in with program, but it also is helping them establish connections in the community with like-minded people.
All right, copy that. I thank you all for your input.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. So if we move forward here, next slide, we have some discussion questions, which I think we've been discussing already, is what's keeping you engaged or youth engaged? What practices are helping to do that? And we've actually discussed a lot here and presented some, but does anyone have anything that we haven't discussed, you know, with the food or money or anything like that, that helps keep the youth engaged? Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to speak on it. One of the new things that we have started doing to kind of get youth engaged in aftercare is doing like a monthly activity for only aftercare youth, and just kind of setting that up and having them come, and it's kind of helps with the youth that might be, you know, falling through the cracks, or the youth that aren't really necessarily engaging or wanting to establish case management goals in itself. And it kind of gives them like a safe place that they can kind of get reconnected, still establish any services that they need or any basic needs. And it also kind of gives them an outlet to be connected to, you know, either the community or healthy relationships with each other through other youth or aftercare, and just kind of get them, you know, noticing that it's not, you know, just meeting to do case management, but that there's a lot of other, you know, resources and things that we offer. So we've been doing that once a month, and we've had some pretty good attendance so far. So that's definitely kind of helped. And one of the biggest things that I've just came across that has helped youth be engaged, and this was definitely a lesson to learn, is just to be present and be consistent with them. And, you know, this is still something that it can be hard at times when a youth tells you to leave them alone, but just kind of showing up and being present, you know, it definitely can kind of help them know that when they are ready for those services, we are there.
And you say you have seen an increase in response doing that?
Not a major one, because we did just start it, but yeah, we've had, I think the last activity we had almost 8 youth, and aftercare just show up to it, and just, you know, we went to a pumpkin patch and just kind of, you know, we're able to celebrate the harvest holidays. But from there, you know, there was a couple youth that were like, hey, how about we set up a meeting, or hey, could you stop by my school and you know, check in and chat. So it's definitely kind of opened a new avenue, and for them to also think of us not just as like a service, or, you know, adults or people that tell them what to do, but also just having their engagement and willingness to want to do it and want to reach out and want to drop by and, you know, grab a snack bag by one of our shelters, or just reach out for support when they need it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else?
Tom, I wanted to bring something up that seems to be a theme throughout the chat. And I think it's probably more relevant to the TLP than the BCP programs. But I was just wanting to get some thoughts with regards to the references to relationships, and Prince brought it up early on, but that is, you know, can be a pivotal part of the, you know, maintaining engagement in the youth, staying, you know, in aftercare. But with the staff retention issues, especially with the TLP, when you could be working with the youth for 18 months, you've got to, I'm just wondering how you're navigating that with the staff turnover. And are you doing transition sessions with them so that they, you know, to engage them with that next staff member who's going to come on board, or if retention is creating in any way being problematic to what you're talking about, and if so, how you're addressing it. Silence is okay.
Turnover, what turnover?
Janice, I'll speak on that a little bit. I have actually had some feedback from past residents when I've done some aftercare recently, just about like when they've come by and received services, that it's been weird because they didn't, you know, recognize most of the staff. And so I met with that youth and came to the shelter and did some introductions. And when she came by the next time, she actually texted my work phone and said, "Oh, so nice to see those staff again." So I think that a warm handoff, or like really introducing, because if they are coming by and there is an open doors policy and they come in and they don't know anyone, that can be really weird for them. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Thanks, Liza. Jenna?
Thanks.
One of the things that we've done is had consistent activities year after year, so that when there is staff turnover, they're coming with a group of people that they already know, and they're able to meet the new people. And it's amazing how they build relationships just through those activities, and not necessarily only from the time they were in the program.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Ryan?
Yeah, I think it speaks to the larger implications of staff turnover. So my answer to that is to attack staff turnover by focusing on self-care, supportive environment, and working to keep staff engaged in a work-life balance. So my approach here is I'm going to solve a bunch of problems by getting people to stick around as long as they can.
Right. And that's a good point. If your staff's not modeling the behavior you're trying to get the youth to engage in, it's not going to be very effective. Okay. Next slide. For agencies who administer multiple grant programs, are there any differences in the way you deliver aftercare services between the program? I'm going to pick on someone here in a minute.
So Kendra, she's only spoken once since we've been online. So let's pick on Kendra. Kendra, can you talk about the difference between, or are there differences between your BCP aftercare and your TLP aftercare?
I just want to point out that Drew hasn't spoken at all yet, so.
But he did mention the food drop.
I know. I just have to throw it out there. Differences in aftercare between programs. In general, we like to keep our services as consistent as possible across the continuum. However, we are aware, as most of you are, that there are different age groups that we're serving across the continuum. And so you do have to pivot your services a little bit to be able to meet those age groups where they're at. You're probably not going to focus on long-term permanent housing with a 12-year-old, but you would with, a 19, 20-year-old. So it's a little bit kind of different in terms of your case planning, where the goals are at, those sorts of things. I would say that we tend to pilot more opportunities or changes or differences with our BCP program. And then if it works, we move it to the rest of our programs. So our BCP program gets a lot more kind of piloted. Let's try this, let's try that, let's see if it works. So I would say that's kind of the main difference is just focusing on the age groups you're trying to keep in connection with throughout your aftercare and continuum.
I can share too, since you threw me out there, Kendra. Yeah. Hey, first and foremost, shout out to Coffee Oasis.
Yeah. Oh, love it.
Got my sweatshirt on. It's the most comfortable sweatshirt I own. Yeah, I think that the one thing that came to mind when Kendra was talking was that I feel like it's easier to do aftercare and follow up in the BCP for us anyways, because they just come back because there's so much robust stuff there at the BCP, right? So our TLP is scattered site, and so we have an office that has a food pantry now, and we have resources and there's staff there, but there's not peers, there's not gaming systems and movies and 3 meals a day. and those sorts of things. So I think that just the sheer fact of everything that the BCP provides for youth, it allows for kind of that easier connection with. And to Ryan's point too, I think some of the pieces that, I mean, youth definitely get super connected with staff, but I think they also get connected with the feeling of support that the program provides too. So not just not just the individual staff, but what they get out of the space.
Okay. Anyone else have something?
Amber, did you want to come off mute and share what you put in the chat? Mike's not working. That's okay. Thanks anyway.
I do have a quick notion. We have really good success with kids' mail when they don't change their address at the post office. Getting their mail to them seems like a great way to connect. Especially checks.
Do any of your programs operate as a mail stop for the youth?
We will take, oh, hold on. I have to use my phone and my computer to get the whole experience. Sorry about that. We will have stuff delivered here for youth that may have like housing insecurity. They may not know where they're going to be from 1 week to the next week. And that way we know that we're going to at least see them when they come in to get their mail.
Okay. And I
Yeah, it looked like several agencies when they were popping in the chat box. Yes, we do. Yeah, that's great.
So that will keep them engaged. And Bree, I do appreciate the surround sound version of our program. All right. Does anyone else have any questions about anything RHY related while we're here? We have a few minutes left and wow, 15.
And more specifically, are there any questions with regards to the expectations that FISB RHY has of our grantees in executing aftercare? Any administrative questions about that?
Okay, Larry, you have an interesting thing there. You know, we go by state law or state licensing regulations. We don't set the requirements for that. We have many places with a BCP shelter and drop in at the same facility. I don't know if there's a separation that they're talking about or if it's just your licensor specifically. But that would be a good question to ask others while you have them here as to how many of them have drop-in and BCP shelters in the same facilities.
And Tom, where's the grantee located?
I'm sorry?
Where's the grantee located?
Oh, I think Clark.
Oh, it's
County?
Washington?
Vancouver, yeah, I think it's Clark County, I think.
Oh.
I have drop-in and shelter services that are separate, but that is because of the DHS licensing that says it has to be. So it would really depend on who holds your license. You know, if you're unlicensed, then that wouldn't be a problem. But if you have somebody holding your license, it would be up to them if you can, you know, have them, if you can have them together or separate, along with your state and county rules.
Okay. Well, that's a new thing for me. I haven't heard that before. So, and you bring up a good point. County may have other rules beyond the state requirement. So that is a good point. Yeah, Dave, VOA, that's
Oh,
Spokane.
VOA, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, they have it. Okay.
Covenant House, Alaska did until just recently had them in the same facility. And we were licensed. But we have since changed that. And one of the requirements of licensing were certain ratios that didn't always fit. And so that was a catalyst for us deciding to moving them apart. I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but.
Well, I know Fairbanks has drop-in and shelter in the same building.
Well, Cocoon House in theory, I mean, they've got their drop-in on one floor but it's the TLP program, but they've also used that for BCP during the whole COVID capacity issue. And I've never heard it be a licensing issue.
In Alaska, it was the licensing came into play, like Jenna had said, but what we did was change the ages to meet state requirements, and our state allowed it to go through the age of 21. And so now that we've dropped licensing, it actually allowed us to do drop-in with the expanded full age defined youth, through the age of 24.
Right, but that's your TLP, right, Randy?
And that's when we moved the miners, the Mac house off the main footprint where our aftercare services are located.
Right, but your drop-in is now with your TLP instead. It's same location it was. You just moved the shelter out.
It's actually a different shelter, but yes.
Well,
It's the original part, but our ROP and our Passage House programs, both the TLP programs, are off-site from that campus.
Okay.
Hey, Tom.
Yep.
So with Crosswalk, it's licensed overnight emergency shelter, drop in during the day. So from 5 o'clock at night till 9 o'clock in the morning, youth under the age of 18 are the only ones allowed in the shelter. From 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we have drop in up to 21. So that's how we do it in the same facility.
Okay, so that's a difference in your licensing actually. All right. There's a lot of good information flowing here. Getting up there.
Hey, I did want to point out that it also, the nature of your shelter matters. So if you're youth or under 18 and you're dealing with minors, or you're classified as crisis, or it matters, the way that you classify it as far as your licensures are concerned. I have seen and heard of in other areas where the drop-in center and the shelter are in the same building. It's just for us, we can't do it, but I've seen that.
And there could be a lot of variables that go with the decision from your licensor too. But it's sounding like in Washington, it's pretty much you're not going to have them in the same building. If it's an actual shelter, not an overnight shelter, it's full-time shelter. Okay, well, that was a great conversation and good information. I appreciate everyone sharing like they have. It's always good to get you guys together to share information. Janice, did you have anything else to?
I don't have anything else. I don't know if we want to give them 10 minutes back on their day though.
Well, gee, I don't know.
We don't get an opportunity to come together as a group as a larger group. It's great that we had 90 at our peak, I think, on this call. Any other, Drew, hands up.
I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our Social Security administration training that is happening on December 15th. It's a Region 10 wide training. That's intended to be somewhat Social Security 101, but hoping that it's geared towards, you know, kind of experiences of youth who are experiencing housing instability and kind of what that means for folks who may not be currently placed at home, and how that, you know, pay system works and things like that. So if you have not received any information about that training and are interested in it, please reach out to Thomas or Janice or myself. I can put my contact information in the chat. Yeah, December 15th for about an hour and a half or so in the middle of the day. And yeah, just wanted to say that.
I appreciate you mentioning that, Drew. We currently have a little over 40, I think we're at 44, 45 for our registration. It'd be great if we can build that up a little bit, and we'll be sending out reminders. And I think most of you have Tom and my's email address, but there it is in the link. And Drew, if you could pop yours in there too. I apologize, I couldn't remember it from heart. And Prince has got his hand up.
Until very, very recently, retention was a problem for me also. It is the major problem that I'm hearing all over our country. Every time I talk to somebody, whether I am talking to somebody on the West Coast or East Coast or down South, up North, it doesn't matter. Retention seems to be our biggest issue. Could you speak to how some kind of insight on how we can retain our people without having to break the bank?
That's all I was gonna say. Pay him more.
Well, there has been, you know, with the original CARES Act money coming out, there has been incentive money, some raises. But agencies have to be very careful about that because it's not an ongoing funding stream. So they have to look forward to being able to sustain the raises or the bonuses, things like that. It's helped. That certainly has helped. And there's also a lot of non-monetary things that can be done to help improve quality of life for the staff. So they don't feel like they're being, you know, thrown in with the lions. But I've been around quite a bit, and I've talked to a lot of programs, and I haven't seen a magic answer to any of it. It's just lots of advertising, lots of applications. Some get ghosted. You know, it's a tough area right now. I'm sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like I need to say something on this since I tooted my own horn about this earlier. But something that's just been really successful for us here at Safe Place, and just to kind of give a background, you know, you're not going to keep people forever, especially in these direct service jobs. Oftentimes, you know, it's entry level, and then once they, you know, distinguish themselves, they start to like raise up and move into other roles or get other offers. And so for just a little context, you know, we are not the highest paying homeless service in our community in Hillsborough. There are others that pay a little bit more, but something that's kind of a marker for me is that all of the staff, pretty much to a T, I can think of maybe like 2 in the last year plus that have left. All the staff that have left have stayed on as relief staff for us for our 24-hour shelter. And that means that like there's something there that they want to have a foot in the door back at our place and to continue to work with our youth. And I think, you know, that speaks to kind of, you know, like you're going to be flexible with that piece, but I think that speaks to the supportive environment that we've established there. And for us, it comes down a lot to really putting front and center that work-life balance, making sure your people have breaks. I know it seems like a really basic supervision piece, but like systemizing that and putting that into the culture of your workplace and really centering those times. The other day is the first time I've ever done this is in my 15 years as a supervisor, but I thanked people at our staff meeting for taking time off and for not working. because there are people who were out sick or who had family bereavement, or who just, you know, needed a mental health day. And it's important to make that okay, because I think in our work, there is kind of this unspoken rule about leaving it all on the table, and that we're helping people who don't have much. And so if we have this, then we should be able to like give everything of ourselves to help them. And I totally identify with that emotion and that feeling, but ultimately I'm looking at how do we keep doing this for another 15, 20, 30 years, or however long it takes to solve the problem. And I'm looking to have people come back every day and be consistent. So, you know, one of those is I've changed my outlook for when I'm hiring people. Right now, I want the most boring vanilla people I can get. I want them very stable and consistent, so that there's not this volatility, you know, in their personality, because the population we work with is going to bring that volatility. And so when I'm looking to fill in roles, not that like any of us have a whole lot of you know, variety in who's applying anyway, but one of those features that I'm looking for is stability over anything else. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Drew, can you take a minute and talk about the stay interviews that Kendra was noting in the chat?
Sure, yeah. I just want to first just get down on record, and this is being recorded, that Ryan just said he's going to be at Boys and Girls Aid for 20 to 30 years, I think is what I heard. So shout out to that. That's awesome for us. Also, something our agency has been doing that just personally for me felt really just like it was just a moment that it made me feel really seen in the work that I'm doing, is that we're conducting stay interviews with our staff. So as opposed to exit interviews, we're asking folks why they're staying. And so for people that have been here for a while, I think it just provides them an opportunity to speak on like what aspects of the work and their supervision and their team and the agency that has led to them wanting to stay and continue to do the work. And so we're hoping to use, everyone in our agency is going to be given a stay interview, and hoping to kind of utilize that information to get folks to stay longer in other areas, and maybe even kind of utilize that in job interviews to help kind of figure out what appeals to people too. So it personally felt really nice to me, and it was like 10 minutes. So was super like not formal or anything. It was just like, what is connected with you here. So it was a really good experience, and I've been trying to share it with everyone.
All right.
I hope we all noticed in the chat that Kendra's trying to take credit for Ryan. So just to let you know.
Hey, Drew, could you send me just if you have anything, an outline of it, could you send that to me?
Yeah, I'll try and get that from HR, and then I can share it with folks for sure. Yeah. Prince,
Copy that.
Do you want to put your email in the chat for me, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, and not to outdo what Drew put on, but I want to make sure that y'all see this t-shirt that I can't wear every day, but that's from Jackson Street Youth Services Center, or Jackson Street Youth Services, and a good old promotional piece. But also on the sweatshirt that you're wearing, Drew, I think that was a good opportunity for Julie to step up and invite us all to their house so that we all can get a sweatshirt.
It's a bit of a travel for some.
Yeah, I actually just happened to like stumble into a coffee shop, and I was like at an Airbnb on vacation, and there just happened to be a coffee shop right like there. And I was like, oh yeah, I need coffee. And then I was sitting there waiting for my coffee, and I noticed all this advertising and marketing on the walls, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And it was just like, it was awesome. And it was Coffee Oasis, and they're a FISBE grantee, and it was the most wonderful serendipitous moment. It was cool.
That was great.
So, yeah.
All right.
Well, Tom, it's 4 o'clock straight up.
Yep, we've reached our time. I really want to thank everybody for your participation and all the great information you've shared here. Janice and I, of course, are always available for other questions or whatever you may have. So I think, Janice, did you have, yeah.
Before we fade out into the sunset, I only have the top 4. I only have 4 visual screens on me. Jeff, are you on? Jeff Daniels? Are you with us? He was on earlier. Jeff Daniels is the regional program manager that Tom and I report to, who's out of Denver, Colorado. So I was just wanting to see if he wanted to say hello before we signed off. Everybody's saying thank you, thank you, thank you, signing off. I just want to just say what a pleasure it is to work with you all. And I'm really looking forward to the training in December that we're having, to get to know, have an opportunity to meet more of the staff that Tom works with. I think that's a great opportunity for me as well. I appreciate that. Appreciate y'all.
And keep in mind, the reason Region 10 is the best is